Hey guys, it's twilight here in Asheville, North Carolina, and I wanted to share something with you that came up this week that I think is really interesting. We're working with some PR people right now for SeekHealing, getting the word out there about what we're trying to build, as you know, the money that we're trying to raise to make this thing happen. And this journalist wants to take a really interesting angle with our story, and it's a good one, and it's one worth talking about, I think. She wants to frame it as, what can you do right now in a very practical way to help a loved one who's addicted to opioids? And I imagine many of you out there, maybe even the reason why you landed on this site and this video right now is because that's exactly the question that's in the forefront of your mind. So I want to lay out some really actionable, clear things that you can start doing right now. First and foremost is create room for authentic connection with that person, and really chew on that and what that means. Find some time and some space to meditate on how you've actually been treating them. If this is a person who's been in your life for a while, maybe they've been in your life for a long time, maybe through several cycles of relapse and ineffective rehab, and you're both frustrated, maybe you're both angry, maybe there's a lot of feelings going around and being thrown back and forth, or maybe in some ways even worse, the feelings aren't being thrown back and forth, they're just simmering under the surface. I would encourage you to take a moment to step back and think about this and practice the skill of empathy. Really put yourself in their shoes, and how it feels to be on the receiving end of all of the social judgments that come with addiction and that come with, quote, failing rehab, and relapsing and going back to old patterns. What we really need to be doing is reframing this whole process and understanding how what they're going through is something that you can fully relate to as another human being who experiences ups and downs in your life. You go through periods of depression, you have moments of anxiety. Maybe you even struggle with some compulsions and addictions yourself, which aren't as destructive or socially unacceptable as heroin use or opioid addiction, like what they're struggling with. But see if you can start to see the parts of their journey that are similar to yours and find resonance for those moments. It's important to embrace your own personal growth and mental health challenges and start to find empathy for the parts of your experience that are the same as theirs, so that you can engage them in a way that intentionally minimizes shame. So that's really the first point, is do whatever you can to minimize shame in your relationship with this person. Now that's much easier said than done, right? And as you start to unpack this, there's only so much that I can say with my words to offer you the signposts at the beginning of this journey. The rest of it will be a path that you find and create for yourself in this relationship with this person. But it begins with this idea of minimizing shame and exploring what that really means, and starting to dig into the parts of the way that you might be treating them that do perpetuate shame, whether you acknowledge it or not. The second, and the rest of my points really are just to support that main thesis of intentionally minimizing shame in this relationship, doing whatever you can to break those stereotypes and get rid of the stigma and just talk to this person that you love on a really human level, not trying to tell them what to do because you know a way that's going to work better, than what they're doing, but just actually being present with them, and not shaming them. So that means encouraging them to open up about their feelings. It means avoiding having serious conversations when you can tell that they're not ready to open up. When you can tell that they're feeling emotionally unsafe or they're physically not well. If they're in active addiction, this means not talking to them when they're withdrawing, or when they're having serious cravings, or not even asking questions as specific as that, but just being aware of what their physical state is like, right? You can tell when someone doesn't feel good, or when someone's tired, when they're hungry. Start to be aware of that, and instead of judging them for it, instead of judging them for their physical health or things that might be manifesting from that, offer them just the space to feel whatever they're feeling and avoid having serious conversations when they're not feeling good. But then when they do open up, if you're successful in this strategy of intentionally minimizing shame in your interactions with them, then eventually they're going to feel safe enough to open up. And when they do, it is critical that you reward that vulnerability with respect and with compassion, and never with sympathy. Never saying things like, if you get to this point, someone might open up about a past trauma, or something that's really been bothering them, the shit that's under all the feelings that they might be expressing outwardly and underneath the addiction itself, right? And when they start to open up about that, it might be really heavy. It will probably be really heavy. And the worst thing you can possibly do in that moment is say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Or it's okay, things that, again, can you notice? Can you take a moment to step back and notice how that, even in itself, just ever so slightly perpetuates shame, perpetuates an idea that, oh, yeah, that sucks that happened to you, and it's not okay because it means you're not normal. How would that make you feel? Or at the other end of the spectrum, that it means you're so normal, and of course you have trauma because you're an addict, and everybody has a sob story, and all of that damaging language. Or even if you don't say it that way, if that's coming across somehow in your behavior and the way that you respond to them with your words, the truth is, no matter who you are or what your experience has been, it takes courage to be vulnerable because of the exact shame mechanisms that I'm talking about right now. It takes huge courage to open up about the way that you're feeling and what caused you to feel that way. And the truth is that you cannot compare trauma. One person's unspeakably, gory and awful abuse story might create a unhealthy coping mechanism that is to the same degree of unhealthy as someone who had a much more subtle verbal abuse situation ongoing for years while they were growing up, or maybe even just a single event in a schoolyard one day, that they have buried somewhere deep in their repressed memories. None of us are in any position to judge each other for the experiences that we've individually had and how we have individually coded them and individually developed coping mechanisms to respond to them and to deal with their aftermath in our everyday life. The only way to respond to that kind of vulnerability is with respect and compassion, with respect for the courage that it took to even open their mouth and share those words. The worst thing you can do in that moment is try to offer advice or to compare. All you can really do is just admire them for sharing their emotion. And see if you can do that. Practice doing that. See if you can see how beautiful it is, that expression of emotion and of being human. And see if you can feel how much more connected to them it makes you feel when you're able to receive that without judgment or assessment. What it probably means is finding new, very simple ways of acknowledging and admiring and of expressing yourself in those moments. Really simple things like saying thank you or I see you. And letting it be what it is and letting silence be there if that's what needs to be. Silence is better than judgment. And lastly, actually second to last, I need you to open up and be vulnerable yourself in this relationship. And this is something that will come with time as you continue to practice this. In the beginning, you just need to catch yourself when you get into those moments of trying to give advice when it's unsolicited, or compare, and doing these other things that subtly perpetuate shame, these social mechanisms that I'm talking about. So first catching yourself in those moments, and then replacing what you were about to say either with silence or with some vulnerability yourself. And it may come across as super random and non sequitur the first couple times you try it, but it's better. It's better than anything else that you can do, especially better than comparing or offering judgment and opinion and what you would do or what you think they should do. Be vulnerable. Talk about what you're working on. Talk about the last time you were sad. Talk about a time in your life where you were so sad that you felt like you were never going to be happy again. Talk about how you're trying to quit smoking cigarettes, or how you're worried that you're drinking too much on the weekends and you need to pull that back, or how you're thinking about changing some other pattern in your life that you think might be unhealthy. Talk about what's going on in your relationships. Talk about the last time you felt really anxious or stressed at work, and talk about the things that you did to get through that and the support networks that you leaned on to feel better. Share, be vulnerable, and be open yourself. Be a model, and you'll be surprised at how much that actually serves you in the process. So talk about what you're working on in your own mental health, rather than telling them what they should be doing about theirs. And the last point that I'll make is, if there is room for it in your relationship, and I say this with the full acknowledgement that many of you listening may be really struggling with codependent behaviors in these relationships with loved ones who are struggling with addiction. So take this last piece with a grain of salt, and only pursue it if it's in a way that protects both of your autonomy and minimizes codependence. But if there is the space for it in your relationship, then help them explore. I have a really good friend who put this in great words for me recently, a friend who's also in recovery, who shared that, he was like, when I was using, that's all that my friends and I talked about was, where do we get high? How do we get high? When's the next time we're getting high? You just talk about drugs all the time, right? And he said the crazy thing for me when he started the recovery process, in the traditional recovery model anyway, is that we just kept talking about drugs. Except now it was about how not to get high rather than about getting high. But the topic was still the same. It was all about getting high, about how to not get high. And he's like, man, when can I catch a break? I just want to talk about fantasy football, or what I'm, how to fix this weird problem that I'm working on in my car, or whatever it might be. Help them find new things to talk about. Help them explore new ideas. The hardest part about this is that when you go through detox, it's really hard to be interested in anything else. And all of the neurochemical lows that you're going through after withdrawal that might be sustained for some time, it's really hard to explore. And you have no idea what's out there because you've probably spent the better part of your life focused on getting high and how different social situations and activities might help you get high, rather than what the value those social situations and activities actually had to offer themselves. So help this person explore things that might pique their interest. If something, turns them on or gets them excited or makes them comment, explore that with them. And where it is possible and healthy for both of you, actually go out and do those things. Take a yoga class together. Go learn, how to, or share a group meal and cook something together. Check out that new improv comedy club that opened up down the street last weekend. Go check out the farmer's market on the weekend. Sign up for a martial arts meetup. There's a million things out there in our communities that we can get plugged into. And the key is to showing them that this is a full world, full of so many different possibilities for them to get plugged into. All they have to do is start exploring, and feel safe exploring. So that's what I got to say for today. The point really of all of this is to create room for authentic connection with this person in your life, and explore what that really means and recognize how it begins with intentionally minimizing shame. And as you practice, hit me up and let me know how this turns out for you. I wouldn't be surprised if you discover that it ends up doing wonders for your own mental health and your own well-being, and improves the way that you communicate and interact with all of the people in your life, not just this person.